Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at something very basic. We're going to make a shapefile from scratch. When you're making a shapefile, you don't start from ArcMap. You start from a catalog. So you go to where you want to the folder where you want to save your shapefile, and you right click and say new shapefile, and it's going to ask you the feature type. Is it going to be a point, or is it going to be a polyline, or is it going to be a polygon? So in our case, we're going to use a polyline, and then we're going to give it just a random name, say main line, and then it's going to ask you for coordinate system. So depending on where you want to in the world or the extent of your project, that's what's going to determine the coordinate system. But for this case, we're just going to keep it simple and just use the WGS84, and then it's going down here, it's going to it's going to give you an option to check whether or not your shapefile is going to contain m values. The m values are the measure values when you are working with linear reference features, so like pipelines and roads. And so for our case, we're going to check these ones because we're going to have m values on our shapefile. And then of course just gonna go ahead and say okay. When the shapefile is created for the very first time, the only thing that you have, so let's say preview here, the only thing that you have in the attribute table are these three system generated system generated fields. So depending on what is it that you're going to use your shapefile for, you have to add your own fields that's going to serve the purpose for the shapefile. So for example, in this case, we're going to use these to store attributes for a pipeline, for example. So we're going to add some fields, like common fields, something like, say, the size of the pipe, say diameter, and then of course it's going to ask what the data type that's going to be stored in that field. So in our case, we're going to use double here. And then of course another thing that could be needed for a pipeline is something like the install date. And then we're going to make this is a double right here, and then we're going to use this. We're going to make sure this is a date data type. And then we're going to need something like status, whether is it active or is it inactive. And this is going to be text. And then we may have something like comments, or we're also going to need material, whether it's just a steel pipe or plastic pipe. So that's going to be a text. And then of course we're going to need something like comments or notes, and this also is going to be text. Another thing that you have to be careful about is that when you're selecting the data types, it's also giving you the option of the size of the field that you're going to have. So for example, for something like status or material, 50 is a little bit too much, so you can change this into something a little bit smaller. Say material, you're going to have maybe just 20 characters, and then for status we're going to change this down to maybe just 10. And then for notes, for the comment side, most of the time you're going to have a lot of things that are going into this field, so we're going to change this from 50 to something like maybe 250, because there's going to be you make sure that you give yourself enough room for comments. Another thing that you may want to do at later point is to uh, to make sure that the status and material, these don't have like typos. You can change this into domain so that some people who are entering the information don't have to type. They just can have some drop down list to pick from, but that can be done at a later point. So when you're done with this, you just click OK here, and now you have all these fields that you're going to need for your attributes. And now that you have the shapefile created in the fields for your attributes, now you can add the shapefile to your artmap. So after adding your shapefile to your artmap, now you want to create the polyline. What you need to do, so for example, you have a pipeline that you know the starting point and the end point, and maybe you also have the PIs in between. So what you just need to do is just to go to start editing, editor, start editing, new feature, and then of course you're gonna click at the starting point and the subsequent PIs, and then when you are at the end you just click F2 to finish the feature. You can change the color here and the size, and of course now that you have the line, you can go ahead and input the attributes. Say the diameter maybe is just 20 inches, and then the install date was July 1st, and this is active, and it's a steel pipe, and this is and then when you're done, you stop editing and make sure that you save your edits, and that's it. That's how you create the shapefile from scratch.